What else does Lacan have to say about the gaze, in as much as he's derived something of this idea from Merleau-Ponty? Well, he's going to try now to start introducing a series of psychoanalytic motifs in terms of how he started to think the gaze. We can also just quickly note that from what I've said thus far, it starts to become clear why the gaze is itself an exemplification of his notion of the object A. Why? Because there's something in the visual field that engenders lack, that engenders desire, that engenders a kind of anxiety. Whether it's this moment in the sardine can, whether it's the apple thrown out the car, the example that I gave before, there's something in the visual field which is a kind of enticing element that draws me in, that highlights my lack. And interestingly, when you have something that highlights your lack, that could touch the button of desire and lack being coterminous, or it could also touch the button of some kind of anxiety. And that makes sense because we know that the object A is that thing which, as it were, positivizes my lack. It's that external thing which perhaps engenders my desire, perhaps engenders my anxiety, but it positivizes a lack. And so many of the examples that we've given of an apprehension of anxiety engendered by this factor of the gaze always being on the side of the object, not the subject, exemplify that kind of functioning. So let's see then what he's going to say, and of course in each moment where he draws on a psychoanalytic understanding, he's going to further separate how he's utilized this concept and the insight from Merleau-Ponty that whenever there is an act of seeing, there is the possibility of the entire world being able to see me from the various points at which I am able to see the world. All of those represent points that I can be seen from. How is he going to make a couple of psychoanalytic additions to this concept? Well, first off, he's going to say, let's think about narcissism. And narcissism, which I have striven to reintroduce the essential structure it derives from its reference to the specular image. And of course, he's also trying to now say, don't forget my account of the mirror stage, which obviously involves a degree of narcissism. And he goes on to say, which gives the subject a pretext for profound reconnaissance. So let's just keep in mind then that when we're thinking about the visual field and the fact that one can be seen from pretty much everywhere that you can see, that there is the dimension of narcissism. Moving on to page 75, he says, Merleau-Ponty points this out, that we are beings who are looked at in the spectacle of the world. That which makes us consciousness institutes us by the same token as speculum mundi. What does speculum mundi mean? The mirror of the world. And you can hear in the backdrop to these ideas this notion of an all-seeing agent. God, weren't you small once and you thought, oh my goodness, God saw me do that bad thing? I won't elaborate right here now what the bad thing was, but it was bad, bad, bad. This idea that there's maybe an all-seeing eye or a God or a point from which all things can be seen, this is something which seems to be important in these types of theorizations. If there is no satisfaction in being under that gaze, of which, following Merleau-Ponty I spoke of just now, that gaze that circumscribes us, and which, in the first instance, makes us beings who are located at, but without showing this. So, I don't know what we want to make about that, but let's just say that there can be some satisfaction in the gaze, or in the fact, maybe less so the gaze, than in the fact that we can be seen. And a nice example came of that to me. I remember years and years ago being at a seminar where people were complaining about CCTV in the United Kingdom. There's security cameras everywhere. We're always being watched. We don't like it. We don't like it. Wherever I go, there's thousands of images being taken of me every day. And some witty psychoanalyst person says, well, maybe you kind of do like it. The idea being that there's also a residual narcissism that's gratified in being seen and being photographed and being monitored from all these different points in the world. So it's kind of just a nicely counterintuitive provocation. He goes on to say, the spectacle of the world in this sense appears to us as all-seeing. This is the fantasy to be found in the Platonic perspective of an absolute being to whom is transferred the quality of being all-seeing. Now, of course, what Lacan is doing there is he's playing with those philosophical themes, those somewhat paranoid dispositions of I can be seen at any moment. Maybe, as I said, as little kids, we've kind of experienced that. But he's saying that whereas some philosophy pivots on the notion of an all-seeing agent, he thinks that that concept is not absolutely necessary, even if it does seem to be culturally omnipresent. Rather, that function is adequately described and anticipated in his notion of gaze, that there's something of the subject's lack, which is positivized, which occurs in a kind of inverse form in the visual field looking back upon one. Then he gives an example which is a little bit problematic, but let's see it anyways. At the very level of the phenomenal experience of contemplation, this all-seeing aspect is to be found in the satisfaction of a person who knows that they are being looked at, on condition that one does not show them that one knows that they know. Now, I've kind of tried to gender neutralize that, but his example, and that's why I said it's problematic, like a little bit sexist, but this all-seeing aspect is to be found in the satisfaction of a woman who knows that she's being looked at, on condition that one does not show her that one knows that she knows. In other words, I think what he's trying to do there, sexist as the example might be, is talk about the residual narcissism that is gratified in the experience of being seen within this idea of the world that is always potentially seeing me. So he's quickly introduced here an idea of how narcissism plays into this. And of course, in so doing, is doing something different to what Merleau-Ponty would do. Let's end then with a nice example, which is quite striking. And it's also going to keep us thinking about what the gaze might be in psychical life. Now, he doesn't add an awful lot on it, but he just does now open a kind of nice tangent onto the notion of dreams. What does this mean, if not that in the so-called waking state, there is an elision of the gaze, and an elision of the fact that not only does it look, it also shows. So, as we've said, in everyday experience, there is kind of an elision, a pushing back of the fact of the gaze, because the gaze is discomforting, so we prefer not to highlight it. As we've said, in theories that prioritize the consciousness of experience, we don't always want to focus on the gaze. It kind of gets marginalized. Why? Because it highlights the lack of the subject, who is not all self-knowing. But now he's trying to show us something different. In waking life, he says, we have the elision of the gaze. And we also have the illusion of the fact that the gaze might show. What does this mean? In the field of dreams, he continues, on the other hand, what characterizes the image is that it shows. The dream, in other words, is one test case in which that which the gaze seems to represent isn't simply elided, but is shown. How can he develop this? Any dream, you will see that this factor of that it shows is well to the fore. The character of emergence is what we see in the dream of the stain, of its images, of the intensification of their colors. This is what is shown. The gaze is shown in dreams. So we could spend more time on that, but I think it's okay also to let it hang with a kind of provocative sense. What does that mean? In a sense, it does represent a continuity with the very Freudian notion of dreams. If dreams have the capacity to show us something of our repressed desire. And if what is in the gaze, or the gaze as stain, is object A, in other words, that element that fascinates and potentially extrudes upon that positivization of our lack, one can see why it might be that what one experiences in a dream is the gaze that shows itself to us, in as much as it shows those figurations of our desire that are not shown in everyday experience.